2020 is almost over, which means we're going to reflect back at a year of Vanguard and analyze what Bushiroad did wrong and what Bushiroad did right. And in this particular video, we're going to focus on the bad aspect of everything because we're going to take a look at the top 5 biggest mistakes or fuck-ups that Bushiroad did with Vanguard in 2020.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hacker fighters, it's probably not a well-known secret or something that's probably well aware in the community that 2020 was probably not one of the best years for Vanguard in terms of overall performance or mainly what happened with the card game and the choices that Bushiroad made while building upon this card game. And in today's video I want to highlight the biggest offenders of this and analyze why it went wrong and how we could potentially learn from it from the future. And we're going to start off this list with probably something that is not on everybody's radar and they might overlook, because on number 5 I want to put the lack of Blitz Orders. Imagine yourself, you're a company and you create a brand new mechanic and also rules around this mechanic, and your player base has tried to figure out how these rules work, and then proceed to release no cards that actually fall in that category, that actually are using that subset of rules that you made, which made your game a bit more complex for a lot of players. This is the case with Blitz Orders. At the beginning of this year, once wave 3 of the VR started with the whole try free and the GR reboot, we saw the introduction of normal orders and Blitz Orders, aka the order cards, and with them it brought a lot of new mechanics and rulings to the game. Now, the interesting part about the order cards were that they were divided into normal orders, which were used in your main phase, and Blitz Orders, which were used during your opponent's battle phase, aka your guard step. Well, you could say, well, they did introduce a Blitz Order because we had the shield ticket, but interesting enough, that's not officially an actual Blitz Order. It is seen as a ticket card, which is a pseudo order card. So the only Blitz Order that we have in the game is a pseudo Blitz Order. So personally, I think this is quite a mistake on Bushiroad's part, that they introduce a whole type of rule subsets and interactions and things we need to learn, but then never actually use upon it. And of course you might say, well, why this isn't really a big issue this year, but there's a second part to this for me personally, and that's the fact that a lot of us players were very excited about the prospect of Blitz Orders, that we might get more interaction during the opponent's phase, like what we had with G-Guardians, and this was maybe the gateway to the standardized version to it, but sadly we never saw anything of it. And now the question is, would we ever get something like this? So I think this is quite a big offense that they had this year, and that's why I wanted to put it on the list on number 5, because it brought a lot of confrontation to the community and to what the game could actually be. Now hopefully Bushiroad changes this and they will ramp up the creation of Blitz Orders during 2021. So here's to that they might actually pick up on this point. Now for number 4, we actually go to some very problematic things that happened this year and that a lot of players have been talking about and has been touched upon by a lot of creators. Because for the number 4 spot, one of the biggest mistakes that Bushiroad made this year was the immense power creep that was created with each and every single set. And basically it all began with the very first set that we've got this year, which is Crystal Melody. It had Riviere, which was basically the strongest card they ever printed at the time and outcompeted everything. And they had to errata a card with the once per turn restriction on it, so you couldn't really abuse its card. Now the set afterwards, we've got the whole Vanquisher and Revan decks that basically were the best decks at the time for a while. Then afterwards we've got the beginning of the G reboot with Try Free. It wasn't really a power creep, so that was a good sign. But then afterwards we got the MLB set, in Japan at least, and that thing outcompeted almost everything for a while, and from that point onward, things started to spiral out of control faster and faster, because then we've got BTO8, which basically had the Cross and Messiah, then VBTO9 came around with Shaharod and Hydros, then VBT10, which was Luard, which then had to get a restriction on it, and then VBT11 was once again a step down from the power creep, which was a nice sight, but it didn't sold that well because Luard was way too strong. And then lastly we got VBT12, which is basically Gurgit that's now running rampant. And now the final set, which is the Ruda set, that might or might not compete to some extent. To my knowledge, it's not power creeping Gurgit, which is a good sign, so I'm very happy that's the case, but we might get a surprise that suddenly we find a list that overcompetes everything. So Power creep was a big issue that happened this year, and you cannot deny the fact. If you are a competitive player, or you at least play to some high standards, then you have realized the inherent problems that were in this set. And I get that the idea that they need to sell packs and need to make their cards stronger, but the sheer rapid pace of how this happened and how they proceed to do it in this year was probably one of the worst we ever seen in Vanguard, maybe even worse than the last year of the GRO with the whole Ultimate Stride debacle that we had during VBT 13 to VBT 14, and of course the infamous Bermuda Triangle set. So that was number 4, so that means we're going to get in some spicy things after this, because for number 3 we have something that basically comes out of the fact that we had this immense power creep, and I already touched upon it just a moment ago, because for number 3 I have the Luard Banlist issue, or the Luard Banlist debacle. And basically what I'm referring to is the issue that arose once they hit Luard within the main restriction, as it didn't really get the result that Bushiroad probably hoped for. Maybe it did, but it didn't really look that good in the eyes of the community, because what basically happened is that a lot of companies or a lot of stores in Japan got screwed over by this ban list, and there was one of the big stores, one of the big chains, openly stated that they no longer would support Vanguard. And I'm not sure if it was Bushiroad games in general, but at least Vanguard, they would no longer hosted tournaments for it, and they were done with the entire card game. And basically explain why this was the case and why this happened. In Japan, there's a different way how card games basically sell their products and how the secondary market exists, because there isn't really a secondary market to what we in the West are familiar with. Players don't really sell cards themselves. They sell their cards to the stores, and the stores sell them again to the player. That's the way how they go. And the stores, what they did at the time of Luard, is buy up all the cards for Shadow Paladin to a lower standard, so they could make a lot of profit. And they bought all the domains for about $50 a pop, I think, around that ballpark. Could be higher, a bit lower. But they bought all those cards up, so because they knew, or they thought that they could sell them for quite a buck against other players, so they can make a profit. But then that ban list hit, and they restricted the main, and all those stores that bought up those domains for quite a hefty price suddenly lost their entire investment, because the main wasn't worth nothing anymore, and basically they lost a lot of money on that thing. And Bushiroad basically screwed them over, because the ban came out of nowhere, and like 2 weeks after the set came out. And there were better things they could potentially restrict, like they could immediately set a restriction on Bendy, or they could set it on Phantom Blasted Dragon. So a lot of stores got screwed over by Bushiroad because they made a mistake by making Luard too strong, and then hastily restricted the card with another card, which screwed over a lot of stores. So in the eyes of the community and the eyes of the secondary market in Japan, that was quite a fuck up, if I'm gonna be honest. Now, sure, in the healthiness of the game itself, it was probably a good call, because the main also gave it a lot of free pluses to Luard with Abyssal Owl in combination with those factors. So it made sense into some regards, but this shouldn't have happened in the first place, and they shouldn't have screwed over the store owners this much. They should have seen this coming up front, and they should have restricted the main with Luard before the set even came out, so that the store owners knew beforehand that they shouldn't invest in these domains. And you could say, well, it's the fault of the store owners, they should have known, or they did as their business. But keep in mind, this is mainly Bushiroad's fault, because they made Luard way too strong, and it was out for a week or so. And don't forget, it was an emergency ban list restriction, so there was no way that those stores could know upfront, oh, there's going to be a ban list in 3 weeks' times, we're going to be Gucci. No, that ban list came with a couple of days notice, maybe a week or so if I can remember correctly, but it wasn't a lot of time. So yeah, not really good thing that happened this year for Bushiroad. Now, another very problematic thing that happened this year, and I addressed this on this channel with a couple of videos, and that's the promo problem that we have with Vanguard, especially this year. And what I'm referring to is that a lot of clans are getting these staple cards restricted behind promo cards, and the issue with that aspect is that, one, we don't know if we ever get these promos, and two, if we get these promos, then the question arises, how accessible are they? Because in some cases, these promos become way too expensive and they are way too important for that deck, so that could either result in decks being artificially way too expensive, like Dimension Police having a $40 promo with their Twin Order or Twin Blader card, and we had this also with Yuga with the $50 Grade 2 Meomaru that was very important. But in those cases, the cards at least exist, so those decks can be at full power. Now the actual offense where it becomes really problematic is where Bushiroad creates decks incomplete and then makes a promo which is needed to complete the entire engine and then leaves it at that. That means that those decks that comes in actual booster sets, which we are going to get, those are then incomplete. Those aren't at full power, and because they're behind promos, we don't even know if we would ever be able to play those decks at full power, and then the question is how expensive it's going to be. And this happened with the entire VBT 11 set, Storm of the Blue Cavalry, with every single deck in that set, which wasn't really a good thing that happened this year. Now again, there was also other situations where we had the upgraded versions of Claret Sword, Gear Chronicle, Royal Paladin with Altmal, and Ashav for Neonectar that also got a new promos or multiple promos that we never saw or we're going to get to a later extent. Now those are less problematic to some extent because those were added or created later on to improve those decks without having dedicated support. But still kind of annoying for the players that actually plays or pilot that deck. Now I am aware that Bushiroad has been fixing this problem to some extent because a lot of these important promos that I touched upon in my previous videos are actually going to be released in very good reprinted sets or very accessible cards like we see with the Clan Selection plus volumes 1 and 2, which I'm very happy about. But it doesn't combat the entire issues because 1, there are still a lot of promos we haven't got or not confirmed yet, and 2, they should not do this in the first place because it's not a good business practice, if I'm gonna be honest, because that makes your player base maybe not trust you as much that the product that you buy would actually be as good as it should be in the first place. So yeah, this is a tricky ground to go around because you can say, yes, these promos need to be good so they are actually sought after, but at the same time, the actual product you're buying should be suffice to actually use the cards that you're paying money for in the first place. So yeah, not so great that happened this year. But even though we've got a mechanic that never was used, power creep was through the roof, we've got the issue with the whole restriction list around Luard that had some implications in the community support in Japan, and we also have this whole promo debacle that we don't even know if our decks are going to be at full power even when we buy them straight out of the set. It is still not the biggest offense, in my opinion, that happened this year. Because the biggest fuck up, in my honest opinion, that Bushiroad did this year is the fact that there is no news and the absolute silence on Overdress. And the reason why this is a problem is that this is basically a repeat that happened at the beginning of the reboot or when they announced the reboot. Because I explained this on the channel about 2 years ago when I did a retrospect about the reboot after 1 year, about what the issue was that happened. And what happened at that time is that they announced a reboot and explained what it meant, but after they explained the initial thought that the newer cards are going to be the norm and we're going to have a split into formats, then they went silent. And that meant that the community had no idea what's going to happen, and that sparked a lot of distrust and confusion because we didn't know what's going to happen. People thought maybe their cards won't be worth. Maybe premium is only going to be supported for a couple of months and that's it. We didn't know what was going to be the status quo. And that is happening right now as we speak. We don't know what's going to happen with Overdress. And because we don't know, people have been speculating about a potential rotation. Are we going to lose our cards from the standard this year? Is the Clan Selection Plus just a final set and then we lose all those cards? Or are those cards going to be the beginning of a new set rotation? Are we going to lose premium in its entirety? Are we going to go to a whole new mechanic? And probably all these things that we're speculating are completely false and have no ground to be supported because it's all pure speculation. Everything that you've seen read on forums or has been stated by content creators like us has no solidified grounds to be actually truth because there is no information and Bushiroad has been completely silenced. And that is a major problem if I'm gonna be very honest, because players might quit Vanguard because they don't know what's going to happen next year. And the fact that we have a card game like Digimon just coming around the corner right at this point where we're probably at its most vulnerable because we don't know what's going to happen next year is probably not a very good side of what Bushiroad is showing the card game at all. Yes, we finally know that on January the 19th or 18th we're going to get more information about Overdress and we're finally going to probably have the answers to a lot of these questions. But the fact that they announced Overdress, what, 4 or 5 months ago and then said absolutely nothing since then is really, really bad in my eyes, because we as a community don't know what's going to happen in the next era. It could just be like it's absolutely normal, as if it's the next set like any other. No rotation, no nothing. It's just the way it's always been the last couple of years, and it's just with a new mechanic and a new name. It's very much likely that that's just the case and we're worrying for nothing. But the fact that we don't know that that's 100% the truth, or that's going to be the future, means there's room for uncertainty. And that uncertainty leads to fear, anger, disappointment, and probably a lot of confusion that might turn players away from the game, which, in my honest opinion, is such a shame because there's probably completely nothing to worry about. But sadly, I cannot give you that information because I know as much as you do. And that basically concludes the biggest fuck-ups that Bushiroad made this year. Now, again, I don't want to end this video up on a sour note because I explicitly wanted to start with this video because tomorrow we're going to end up with a high note. I want to end this year on a very positive note because even though there were definitely some big flaws that happened this year with the Powercreep, probably one of the biggest or the well-known by everyone. I mean, we have the whole issue with Zarzan, Luard, Gurgwit, and that kind of stuff. But there were also a lot of good things that happened this year. And there were some things that happened this year which I honestly thought wouldn't even happen in the next 10 years, which are some really good signs of things to come in the future if Bushiroad sticks to their guns and actually keep doing this for the coming next seasons. And who knows, might actually make Vanguard even bigger than it could ever be. And we might have a very good card game on our hands that will last maybe forever. But if you're interested in that aspect and know about all the good and awesome things that happened this year, then definitely hit the subscribe button and bell button to be updated for once that video drops tomorrow around the same time as this video. But with that said, I want to give a massive shout out to my patrons as they make this video and everything happening on the channel possible. You guys are amazing. But if you do want to support the channel, then you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one.